Hello, welcome to my next video in my series about the Dark Eye core rules, and we're going to talk about the tradition of the witches a bit more. The witches are organized in, it's not really organized, but still they form sisterhoods. That's what they call. Most witches are female, like 99.999%, but in theory it's possible to play a male witch. It's just very, very rare. And these sisterhoods pretty much tell you what kind of witch is, because in the core rules there are the cat witches, the toad witches, and the raven witches. All witches have a familiar, so the cat witches obviously have a cat as familiar, and they're very social. Most of the time they live in big cities and may be a very active part of social life and of society. And the toad witches are more on their own, living in the forest, a bit away from the next village or town, and they are healers, and they may help people and treat them when they have a disease, or women when they're pregnant and stuff like that. And the raven witches, for example, are prophets and seers, and they're a bit mysterious and such. There were more sisterhoods described in the fourth edition rules, and I expect to be more sisterhoods to be described in the in-depth rules about magic. There will be an additional source book about magic, a rule book about magic coming out. It is not even published yet in German, but it is planned, and I expect it to have a lot more professions and, for example, more traditions in it. And for the traditions that are described in the core rules, I expect to have it more options. So there will probably be more sisterhoods described. Else I don't think there's more to say. The description of the sisterhoods here is quite short. The one important thing for a witch is their familiar. The familiar is a cat, for example, a raven, a toad, a owl, a serpent, a spider, or something. And there is a special bond between the familiar and the witch. Usually, or often, the witch knows the familiar for a longer time, and somehow a bond has formed. But it's also possible that a witch only finds her familiar in later time in her life. The familiar is bound in a ritual to the witch. Not always it's a ritual. Sometimes it forms just over time because they know each other so long, and some of the magical power of the witch are transferred to the familiar over time. But technically it is a ritual that happens, and you have to buy it for experience points. And if you buy it at character creation, you start your game basically with the familiar. If you don't buy it at game start, you have to buy it later and find your familiar later. And the familiar is a normal animal like a cat or something, but it is way stronger and more intelligent. It gets the bonuses described here. It has more hit points, it has a higher armor value, it has high resistance, and it has a pool of astral energy, just like the witch, which it can use to do certain tricks. And the familiar is kind of like a second hero for the player of the witch, because the familiar gets his own experience points. He always gets experience points when the witch gets, but he gets only a quarter of that what the witch gets. And these experience points are not subtracted from the witch. So if the witch gets 20 experience points, the familiar gets 5, and the 5 are not taken away from the witch. The witch gets 20, the familiar gets 5. And the familiar can use these experience points to buy his tricks, his special tricks, the things he can cast, and he can use it to improve his abilities, just like the heroes can with the same rules, and he can use it, even use it to learn special abilities or something, where you have to decide from case to case, from animal to animal, what makes sense. For example, I think for me it would make totally sense to that the familiar can learn a combat ability, like one that decreases your attack and does more damage if you succeed with the attack. I think that could be explained for a familiar, but it would probably not make sense to teach a cat two-handed combat. But if there were witches that had monkeys as familiars, I would say two-handed combat would be an option. But I don't think there are witches that have monkeys as familiars. I'm not sure. So you have to decide. There are no strict rules, and it's not explained in detail how to handle this. You just have to decide what is good possible in your opinion and in the opinion of the game master. So yeah, the next is the list of tricks the familiar can perform. I go through them, not in detail, but I give you an idea what they can do. For example, the familiar can sense the possession of the witch. When the witch has lost something of her possession, the familiar can sense the direction where this thing is. And the next trick is the familiar can intimidate other animals of its kind. So a cat can intimidate other cats, so the cats will leave the familiar alone. And the familiar can use as a messenger for curses, which knows certain rituals, curses, which it can use to curse people and or animals even. And usually it is something the witch would do in the presence of the person. And this trick allows basically to hand over the curse to the familiar, and then the familiar will go to the victim of the curse and transmit the curse to the victim and curse that person. And then the familiar can have a witch sense, which lets him sense the witch about any distance. The familiar will know what direction the witch is. The next ability lets the familiar steal the regeneration during sleep. When you sleep, you can regenerate your life energy, vitality, hit points, and the familiar can watch you in your sleep. He has to watch you while you're sleeping all the time till you wake up, and he will basically steal your regeneration for that sleep. And if the familiar has lost hit points, he can add the regeneration to his own hit points. The next two are specific to the toad. One is toad poison, and usually the toads are poisonous, but this is it turns the poison into a curse. And when you touch the toad, you don't have to touch it with your skin, just with your, if it touches your armor, it's enough. It will transfer a curse for you that will make a lot of warts grow in your face and on your hands, which will make you look very, very ugly. And then there is a damage spell the toad can cast. The toad needs to give up all her astral energy, at least 8 points, and then it will do a lot of damage that is not affected by armor value. It will do 2d6 plus 2 damage that just goes right through armor and will cause a lot of minor injuries, but a lot of them on your body. Then the familiar can sense the mood of other people and transfer that mood to the witch, so the witch will know what mood people are in. Then there's a camouflage ability for the the familiar has to stand or sit still, not move, and then it will take on the color of the background it is in. And as long as it is sitting still, it will get a bonus on hiding. Then animal sense. For this trick to use, the witch and the familiar have to be in contact. For example, the witch holds her cat in her hands, and then the witch can use the senses of the cat on herself. So she will not see through the eyes of the cat, she will see through her own eyes, but she will use the night vision of the cat, and she can hear like a cat. Then this is exactly a different variation. This is unseen observer. This is the ability to look through the eyes of the cat or to hear what the cat is hearing. This works over a distance, so the cat can go somewhere, or the familiar can go somewhere, observe something, and the witch will be able to see through the eyes of the familiar and hear what the familiar is hearing. And then a very important trick is the conversation skill. It basically lets the familiar talk to the witch, but only with in a telepathic way. It will transform images and feelings and experiences to the cat, to the witch, and this will allow for a communication. And the familiar, as it is quite intelligent, has limited ability to understand language, so the witch and the familiar can kind of communicate. The witch can ask questions, for example, what the familiar has seen, or if someone is somewhere, and the familiar can answer that. These are the tricks of the familiar and the description of the familiar. There is more to the tradition of the witches. I think I'll cover it in a second video. A second video will be about the curses and about the broomstick, the broom, how the witches can fly. If you have questions about the familiar and about the tricks or anything I just explained here, then feel free to comment, feel free to ask, send me a message, I'll try to answer it. But for the first part of the tradition of the witches, that's it. Bye.